Thank you. Ms. Olson, question. In your bill, it has basically it creates another category of subpar performance. Is that a good idea? Because the way I look at this is, kind of, I'll use some of my high school students' language. You don't kind of suck. You either do or you don't. And what you're saying is, you're kind of a bad teacher. And if you're not succeeding in the classroom, you need to be marked as such, and they need to be able to, give you some support or show you the door at some point if you don't respond to that support. So why would you create another category of subpar performance? And that may even lengthen the process to get a teacher who isn't succeeding out the door. In fact, it would lengthen that process. And I think that's not the goal here, is it?
Sure. No, very fair question. I appreciate you asking it. We actually spent quite a bit of time trying to determine should we have 3 categories or 4 categories for the very reason that you're describing. I mean, you're ineffective or you're not. And most of the research concluded that it's best, the greater number of categories, the more meaningful the evaluation for teachers, and the more effective you can be in aligning the professional development provided to that teacher according to the needs of that teacher. And so that's why we opted to go with 4 to provide more meaning and to be more specific to the professional development that the school would have to provide. But I am certainly open to amendments if the committee so desires to collapse those bottom 2 categories into one, because we were deciding back and forth ourselves whether we should push it to 3 or 4, and simply decided to go with what the bulk of the studies suggested.
Okay, I just think increasing the opportunity for a subpar teacher to remain in the classroom is not a good thing. And I think that's what your bill does. I think it's counter to what I think your goal is here. But with that, Mr. Thurman has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to say anything today because in a couple of minutes I got to go chair our subcommittee on Health and Human Services. And I thought to myself, keep your mouth shut today. Let's get through our votes. Go do your other work in that other committee. But I've got to say something from one of your witnesses really tweaked me. And this is not directed to you, Ms. Olson. I appreciate your genuine interest in this issue.
Thank you.
But one of your witnesses today started on a line of conversation. I appreciated that he lifted up race. I appreciated that he lifted up class, because all those things have a direct impact on the education for kids of color. I appreciate that. But something about it really smacked me in a way that I just can't sit here and not say anything, to suggest that simply changing, or that the Department of Education simply reorganizing the categories of classification of performance of a teacher, or that simply creating new regulations for how an evaluation would happen, would all of a sudden undo all the social economic factors that cause kids of color and low-income kids to not learn successfully. It offended me. And I can't sit here and not say something about that. I'm sitting here thinking, keep your mouth shut, but I'm going to go and talk in the subcommittee on issues that do impact our kids from a social impact standpoint. And I don't want to hear someone, I'm sure it was well intended, but I can't sit here and just let those kind of things just get stated, and to pretend that just because we say something is a constitutional right, or because we say that something's going to get reorganized by the Department of Education, that all of a sudden automatically kids who are denied the best education because of all these social economic factors that are blocking that's going to change. I'm offended by that. I would rather the conversation be about what are we going to do about it rather than talk about levels and categories. Let's get money into our schools, right? You talked about professional development. I love it. Let's get as much professional development as we can for our teachers to work with our kids who come to school being impacted by violence and trauma, by poverty, by being hungry, by being sick. Let's get the services in our schools that help to remove the barriers that keep our kids from learning. I just can't sit here and ignore when I hear that kind of commentary when you and I both know that there are major barriers that keep our kids from learning, and they're not the levels of classification for how teachers are evaluated. They're not the teachers. We should be getting more money for our teachers to get paid better. We should be doing more around professional development. We should be providing services for the students and families who are served in those communities so all of our kids can get a quality education.
Assemblyman Thurman, I appreciate you being so candid in your remarks. These are the kind of conversations we need to be having as a legislature to drive solutions forward that can help all our kids in all our neighborhoods and all our schools. I agree with much of what you said as it relates to what's needed to achieve more educational excellence for our students in California, and have been a very strong and vocal advocate for more funding for our schools, for more professional development, and many of the other programs that you suggested. I believe, if I may speak on behalf of the witness, I believe what he was trying to suggest is that this is one piece, one small piece of what needs to be a much larger package of education reforms in order to move us out of 46th in the nation for educational excellence and into the top quartile that our students and our teachers deserve. So while this is not the silver bullet that is going to mean every kid gets access to quality education, it is an important piece of the puzzle, because if we don't have a robust evaluation system, if we don't have school districts that are even complying with existing law, there's no way to measure whether our students are accessing the quality education that they deserve. So I certainly understand your remarks, agree with many of them, but if I can, I believe what he was trying to suggest is that this is an important piece of a much larger puzzle that we all need to work together on, passing together. And that's why this is one piece of a much larger package that we're working on moving forward, because of the comments that you made. So thank you for making them.
No disrespect to your witness. You were a better witness for your own item. Again, my comments are not directed at you.
Understand.
But when I have the opportunity to take my kids to a great school too. And I have had the opportunity to be provided with a great education, even though I come from an immigrant background, in a low-income community, on food stamps, in a community where many folks didn't do very well educationally, where people told me I wasn't supposed to make it. But because I had teachers who believed in me, and faith leaders and family members who invested in me, I make it my business to want to work on making sure all of our kids in our school systems get a great education. And I'm fired up when I hear people make comments that suggest that all we need to do is simply rework these categories and simply require the department to create new classifications and guidelines, and that is going to change hundreds of years of inequity that have barricaded our children's ability to get a quality education. As you say, I would like the conversation to be about putting the right resources in the classroom, in the schools, and in the communities so that we can help our children learn. Thanks again for your interest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chavez.
I'd like to take the discussion back to the bill. Evaluation. Have you had the opportunity to look at other professions or careers and seen what sort of evaluation systems they have?
I have. I've looked at a number of different systems in a variety of different professions, both public and private. The norm is to hold regular evaluations. In fact, prior to serving in the state legislature, I was an administrator in the Cal State system, in the CSU system, and I was required on an annual basis to provide an evaluation to all of the employees in my department. We're not asking for anything more of our school system. That's how we as individuals can improve our performance. I, as an administrator, received an annual evaluation of my own performance, and I actually really appreciated it, because no matter what our profession, no matter how entry level or how experienced we are, we can always get better. But we cannot get better if we don't know our areas of weakness upon which we can improve. And evaluation provides that information to parents, to students, to principals, to teachers, so that we can take that information and then provide the training and the education opportunities we need in order to turn those weaknesses into strengths. That's all we're trying to do here. And yes, we have modeled this under many other professions that require evaluations, both in the public and the private sector.
And if I may, some time ago we took a tour to the Silicon Valley and watched the different emerging industries, and they actually had immediate evaluation of all performers at Yelp, and Google is actually on the wall behind them as they're performing. So they're being evaluated every continuous. You could actually argue a profession of the police officers. Police officers are often evaluated, if not every 6 months, every year. But now with the introduction of technology and cameras, police officers essentially are going to be evaluated every time they do any action, which actually could cause them to come to court. In my previous career in the Marine Corps, we like to think that we're very excellent. We actually have 6 different levels of evaluation. Goes from unsatisfactory, below average, average, excellent, and outstanding. And in those levels of evaluation, we're required to be evaluated every 6 months and anytime you change your job. So essentially you're evaluated 3 to 4 times a year. And in that system, it's an up or out. So there's a lot of different industries that evaluate, and that's all we're trying to do, is to bring some level of evaluation here. I hope this bill will go forward, at least to have an opportunity to continue the discussion, because my experience, professionals like to be evaluated. You know, basketball players says, give me the ball, let me make the basket. People who are in the stores get evaluated by Yelp every second. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It actually makes you better. And so how do we work? Where's the sweet spot? We need to have that discussion. So I think that's what this bill does. So I'll move the bill.
I make a substitute motion to move the bill to interim study.
We've had a motion. We've had a substitute motion. Ms. Olson, you may close.
Sure, thank you. I will take the opportunity to close just to remind the committee that I come from a family of public school teachers. As I said, I have 5 public school teachers in my immediate family, everything from special ed to elementary school, junior high school, and high school between those 5 people. This bill upholds existing collective bargaining agreements. So all the people who spoke to the concern that this undermines their collective bargaining, quite the contrary. The language of the bill upholds those agreements. 65 to 72% of teachers in California support education reforms including ones like these. And so despite the showing today, the overwhelming number of public school teachers want reforms that give them the opportunity to truly excel even further in their careers and even better teach the children that they love. That's why they went into this profession in the first place. Our kids deserve access to a quality school and to a quality teacher, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their background, regardless of their socioeconomic status. And this is one small piece of a package of reforms that are required, that are necessary in order to provide that type of education to our kids in California. A study of 2.5 million kids by the National Bureau of Economic Research determined that a student's lifetime income could be increased by more than $250,000 if the bottom 5% of teachers were replaced with an average teacher. $250,000. Now, the overwhelming number of teachers are fantastic teachers. We're not talking about a lot of teachers, but a strong evaluation system can make sure even more of our California teachers move into a category of excellence. It helps teachers, it helps students. This bill is a very modest update of the Stoll Act, very modest. In fact, it really only underscores the importance of existing law, and then it adds an important enforcement trigger because 86% of our schools are out of compliance with existing law. Our kids need us to act. I understand the interest in an interim study. There are a lot of bills going around on this issue, but our kids need us to act, and they need us to act now. They don't need us to act next January after we study an issue that's been studied for decades. We are 46th in the nation for educational performance in California. My 3 school-age kids, your grandkids, our neighbors' kids deserve better. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue that Republicans and Democrats have got to come together on. We have got to act. We have got to act in this session because our kids, our parents, our teachers, our families, our employers, our employees are waiting on us. So please reconsider the motion to send this bill to interim study. Please consider the motion that we have on the table to pass AB 1078 today. California's future is counting on us. Our kids are counting on us. And I am imploring you to reconsider and act. Respectfully ask for an aye vote on 1078 and a no vote on the interim study.
Thank you. Madam Secretary.
If I could just
please
point
call-
of clarification, are we voting on the interim study or the bill? What are we
Well,
voting on?
we're voting on the motion, which is a substitute motion, to move the bill to interim study.
In the interim study, we just did an interim, we just passed a evaluation bill last committee meeting. Why would we put this in an interim where the other evaluation, I think it was yours, went forward? Why is this going in? The maker of the motion, explain to me, why did we put this in interim
Mr.
study?
Chavez, we have a motion. We're going to vote on the motion.
Yeah, but I'd like to know why it
The
voted
order
on
of
it.
business is that we vote on the motion. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
The motion is to move to interim study. O'Donnell?
Aye.
O'Donnell, aye. Chavez?
No.
Chavez, no. Kim?
I want to
Kim.
clarify
Kim.
that we're voting on the motion to send this bill to study.
Yes, we are, Ms. Kim.
I vote no.
Kim, no. McCarty? McCarty, aye. Santiago? Santiago, aye. Thurmond? Thurmond, aye. Weber?
No.
Weber, no. So it's 4-3. Yes.
The motion passes. Mr. Chavez, file item number 29, AB 1248. Mr. Chavez, you may begin when you're ready.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I had a prepared statement, but having watched this for the past hour, I think I'm going to go off and actually use the evaluation that was presented by the staff members, your staff, of your committee, to talk about this bill, AB 1248. This bill is actually continuous quality. I think any coach in any school in the state of California would never start off his season thinking, oh, whatever I did last year, I'll do this year. I'm okay. I would imagine every one of them wanted to have continuous improvement. You know, I was talking some years ago to a gentleman who was the assembly member in the 76th Assembly District in 1967. He was a young man who was running for assembly, and when he did a debate, there was the discussion in 1967 of having teachers be in collective bargaining and be part of a union. And he actually, in the hearing, spoke against that in 1967. He said the next day he got a call from the Teachers Association who gave him a check and said they were supporting him because they said, you know what? We're teachers. We're a professional organization, and we do not want to see ourselves as anything but a professional organization. That was in 1967. That is when California was 2 or 3 in the nation in education, in 1967. I'm an old guy. In 1967, I was in high school, and I can tell you when I moved into Torrance from Abadio, when I moved into Torrance, I never saw a teacher of color through all my time at Howard Wood or Torrance High School. But I can tell you this, I never met a teacher who did not care about me and want me to be successful. In fact, if I'd have listened to all my teachers who tell me to do things, I'd probably have gone much farther than I am today. These teachers were outstanding. They were professionals. Essentially what this bill says is actually what your analysis says, that we need, the studies have shown that based on research, tenure should not be granted, and I'm reading from your report, Based on research, tenure should not be granted before a teacher has been in the classroom for 4 years. For many tenure reform advocates, the ideal probationary period would be 5 years, according to the National Council of Teacher Quality 2010. Right now, in our country, 3 states have 1 year probationary period. 9 states have 2 years, we're one of them. 33 states have 3 years. 4 states have 4 years. 2 states have 5 years. They go out to the standards and what our study shows. What this bill essentially does, it allows a longer period of time to evaluate teachers. In fact, if you read the CTA's comments under this, it says, administrators, arguing opposition by the California Teachers Association, opposes the bill and states, administrators generally don't have time or the training to get thorough and validated evaluations of performance. I agree with them. That's why I'm asking to increase it from 2 years to 3 years. I agree with them, and I'm hopeful they'll be supportive of that and live by their words. What this also, the bill does, it recognizes that everybody in life has different levels of performance. When you have a tough time in your life, let's say a health issue, maybe a family issue, maybe an economic issue, you may not be at the top of your game. But what this bill allows you is to go ahead and have other evaluations to get your game back. It doesn't dismiss you. It actually requires for 3 years of time to give you a training program. And what this also does, this bill requires the school districts to offer a professional growth or remediation plan to a certificated employee who's received an evaluation rating ineffective or has received 2 consecutive evaluations of minimal effective. So it's not dismissing people, it's training them. It's recognizing the commitment and investment they have and recognizing that life is challenging. As I stated earlier, there are other occupations where you don't have that. I would suggest the police officers, and I know the same in my career in the Marine Corps. You don't get that second chance, but we're going to give it here for our teachers because we recognize the full investment they have. This is a bill for continued quality. I'd ask you to look at it, and I'd even more like to comment on one of the assembly members who made just the last bill. He said, what we need, and I quote, because I wrote it down for him, more professional development. That's actually what this bill does. It requires more professional development by the administrators. It's clearly that the CTA support this, recognizing you need more time to evaluate people. It's clearly that some members on this committee should support it because they recognize that we need to do more professional development. It's clearly the right thing. If you look at the history of California, we need to bring professionalism back to this very, very important element of our society, and that is teachers. For to support me with here, I have one witness.
Hi, Mike Ambrose again from Students First. I really appreciated Member Thurman's comments, and I want to be clear that we're talking about teachers as a lever for change here, because teachers are incredibly important. Changing tenure from 2 years to 3 years is not going to fix years of systemic racism and systemic inequity. They're going to continue to exist here. At the same time, I think this bill recognizes how important education is, and it recognizes how important teachers are. I testified on this earlier, but the growth curve for teaching is tremendous in those first 3 years. That first, second, and third year, you're growing a lot for most teachers. I know I certainly was. That we force districts to make a choice about 18 months into that, I think is unfair both to the districts and the students and to those teachers. At 18 months, we're going to have principals and districts making choices about teachers that they're giving them permanent status when they're not sure yet that they're going to be excellent at serving students over the course of that status. At the same time, there are going to be districts that make choices not to give permanent status to teachers and to non-renew those teachers because they have not yet reached a point in the growth curve where they're confident that they are going to be great teachers for over their lifetime and over the course of that permanent status. That's a really hard thing for teachers that are on that steep growth curve still in that second year of teaching. Really, we're talking about new teachers here and less so teachers transferring districts. But I think this bill goes a little ways at least to recognizing that it's really okay to wait another year here, and it's beneficial to students and it's beneficial to teachers to take that time to say, okay, you're growing a lot, you're improving a lot, and we want to recognize that, but we want to wait to give you permanent status until we're sure that this is going to be best for the students in this district. I know in here there's concern about using evaluations and about using measures of effectiveness because we don't have a great system yet in California for making a fair determination of effectiveness across districts and across schools even. This is hard to do. Being in here last week and being here this week, we've seen already 3 to 4 bills introduced that are going to do exactly that we're trying to get a better system of determining effectiveness for all teachers. And what this does, I hope with this bill, is to say if you are consistently ineffective, and even with targeted professional development, which we still don't do well enough and we owe to teachers because of what they do, even after that, if you're persistently ineffective for 4 years, then we shouldn't have permanent status, so you shouldn't still be teaching in there. For that reason, Students First supports the bill.
Thank you. Any other members of the public in support? Walk up to the microphone. Seeing none, 2 witnesses in opposition, if there are 2. Please come forward. And if there are other individuals in support, they can line up behind the microphone now.
Go for it. Mr. Chair, Seth Bramble here on behalf of the California Teachers Association, respectfully opposed to Assembly Bill 1248, which does significantly erode certificated employee rights that are critical to attracting and retaining high-quality educators. This bill does 2 things. Really, it extends to a 3-year probationary period. In addition, though, as hasn't been discussed too much, it also gives a district the ability to remove someone's permanent status if they got a series of negative evaluations. Understand, if a district is not happy with the performance of an educator, they should remove their employment, not remove their due process. What this suggests is that you would be removing someone's due process rather than simply removing that person. If someone's getting a series of negative evaluations, you've determined you don't want them anymore, you move through the dismissal process. We spent a lot of effort in a bipartisan effort last year really prioritizing, streamline, and ensuring that that process is less costly, is more efficient, and still preserves due process. But it doesn't make sense to have a situation where someone has been teaching, let's say, 30 years, and now because they've gotten so expensive in terms of the system that we now remove their due process and then just release that person with no ability to challenge what occurred. So it does open the door to those kinds of conversations around age discrimination. The current length of probationary period encourages good personnel practices and supervision by the principal. We heard the support witness talk about an 18-month period. To break that down, if a evaluator comes in, a brand new teacher sees something that they don't like in the beginning of the year in the evaluation process and identifies some professional development, some areas that that educator needs to improve, and then comes back later in the year and that educator hasn't met that bar, let's say 6 months later, they haven't reached the level of growth that the evaluator expects, they still can essentially say at that point, hey, here was the bar, you didn't make the bar, you've got 6 months to show me something, or you're going to have to be non-reelected. It's a hard thing to do, certainly. I was non-reelected my first year actually of teaching in San Jose when I taught in a high-needs community of color there. But what I would say is I've talked with a number of administrators who have no interest in going to a 3-year evaluation period. What a 3-year probationary period. The primary reason for that is principals always want to give an educator every opportunity to improve, and as a result would likely be holding folks who they know probably should be picking another profession for a 3rd year to continue working with kids. They would rather make that decision after 2 years. They felt that time was sufficient to make that decision. Taken as a whole, the proposals within Assembly Bill 1248 would move California in the opposite direction of what sensible reform entails, and that's recruiting, retaining quality teachers. These changes would make education an incredibly insecure profession and would essentially do away with due process, which has the potential to erode academic freedom, a quality that must remain the touchstone for any public education system. We urge your opposition.